Today I have a video for you which will show you the ugly face of the far-left wokies as well as pro-Palestinian mob. No society can operate without any fundamental values upon which the whole society rests on. The modern world we live in, introduced by the West, has fundamental values of individualism, personal liberty, free speech, and rule of law. These are the foundational values of the West that have made the West the greatest civilization known to man. But just like nothing is perfect, these Western values are not perfect either. They have a fundamental flaw in them, which are exposed and exploited by other value-based systems such as Islam, communism, fascism, etc. Unlike the West, Islam's fundamental values are total subjugation of people living within its territory. It gets even worse for those who are not Muslims but are forced to live under the thumb of Islamic values. Just ask the Christians, the Hindus, and now long-gone Jews who used to live under the tyranny of Islam in Muslim countries. Don't get me wrong, it's not just the non-Muslims who suffer under totalitarian values of Islam. People have often recognized the fact that Muslims are the biggest victims of Islam, especially women, gays, transgender, etc. But you would never hear wokies talk about that. But what's happening in the Muslim world is not our primary concern. We can and should condemn the primitive values of Islam that not only hurt non-Muslims, but also Muslims. Our primary concern is how Islam is now beginning to take down the West itself. Other than Islam, the far-left communists and wokes have also allied themselves with Islam in an effort to bring down the Western civilization. But how are these totalitarian groups bringing down the hegemony of Western civilization? Well, as I said, the West endorses and applies its values of free speech on its society. But the fundamental flaw of free speech is that people can use free speech to bring down free speech itself. And once we lose free speech, we lose one of the key components of Western civilization. Check out this Australian Muslim propagandist admitting that an effort to destroy the West using its own values, i.e. free speech, is fair game.
Well, joining me now to discuss some of the issues that were raised over the weekend is Uthman Badar, the Australian spokesperson for His Put to Hear. At the last census, 68% of Australians were Christians.
We're discussing a disturbing incident that unfolded near Liverpool on a Tuesday night.
A protest in Birmingham, organised by Shakil Afsar, a vocal activist.
It will be free from the river to the sea.
But will his views and actions fall foul of the new definition of extremism?
This is only being passed to silencers, and to put a zip on our mouth and say what you are saying is not acceptable, it won't be entertained, and that's wrong. This is not the democratic country that I grew up in. You could take a walk down the streets in many areas and every single thing that we have said and done is agreed by many thousands of British citizens.
He made headlines 5 years ago when a protest exclusion zone was set up around a Birmingham primary school after Shakil led a campaign against inclusion of LGBT literature. He's re-emerged organising pro-Palestinian marches.
Rishi Sunak, you are most definitely a waste man.
Shakil says he doesn't support what Hamas did on October the 7th, but his views and actions might still be considered extremist. And this chant, for example, anti-Semitic.
Surely, do the Palestinians not have a right to arm themselves and stop this tyranny and this genocide that is happening?
A lot of people say, when you chant from the river to the sea, you're saying, stop that genocide over there, but let's annihilate another population over here.
I believe that the Palestinians and the Palestinian resistance movement has a right to defend themselves.
But does that mean...
and arm themselves to defend themselves as per international law.
Up to what? Up to which geographical location?
Up to
between the river and the sea.
Up to between the river and the sea.
So therefore, where do the Israelis live? Where do the Israelis live? That's the main
I'm going to
point.
answer the question.
Okay.
Where the Israelis live is from the river to the sea in a democratic country where they all live peacefully.
Michael Gove says pro-Palestinian events have been organised by extremist groups, and it will be one of the challenges of this definition to decide who falls under it.
This definition does not ban extremism. What it bans is the government giving money or platforms to extremists. I think that's very important to make that distinction. You can still have freedom of thought on this basis, but I think what's quite clear is that we don't want extremist groups to be empowered by government. We want them as far away in the margins of life as possible.
Abdullah represents one group which fears it will be deemed extremist, called MEND. They oppose the government's anti-radicalisation programme and accuse them of Islamophobia. They also help train institutions about Islamophobia.
People who engage with the Muslim community, whether it be in hospitals or the police or any other organisations, universities, things like this, they reach out to us saying, listen, you have some really good material. We'd like you to kind of train our staff with, to talk to us about these issues.
Do you think you'll still be allowed to train the police or medical staff in Islamophobia if you're deemed to be extremist?
I think it's an old tactic, really, that if someone is against you, then you just put this label on them and then you don't have to engage with them.
The government says it's trying to identify all forms of extremism, including the far right. But Muslim groups fear this will disproportionately affect them.
A mob of up to 300 individuals, including British Patriots and alleged members of the English Defence League, targeted a mosque, leading to widespread violence and unrest. The attackers, described by the media as members of anti-Muslim groups, clashed violently with police, injuring over 50 officers.
Far-right protests are erupting across the UK, targeting mosques, people of colour, and resulting in hundreds of arrests. The protests started after rumours spread that a Muslim immigrant was the perpetrator of a stabbing attack in a children's dance studio in the town of Southport on July 29th, which left 3 girls dead. The 17-year-old suspect in the attack could not initially be named for legal reasons, but the police confirmed that the suspect was born in Wales and has no known connection to Islam. He has since been named as Axel Rutakabuna. But the claim that the suspect was a Muslim migrant was presented as fact by many far-right figures, including Tommy Robinson and politician Nigel Farage. Hundreds gathered on July 30th, targeting Southport Mosque, with the resulting riot causing widespread damage to the mosque and public property. The next day, hundreds of far-right supporters gathered in Westminster outside Downing Street, chanting phrases such as "Stop the boats" and "Save our kids," as they threw bottles and cans at police officers. Over 100 were arrested. Protests have also spread to the towns of Hartlepool, Aldershot and Manchester, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer set to meet police officials to discuss policing the unrest. But many have criticised the silence from the government that has not sought to reassure Muslims, with many feeling unsafe and vulnerable amid rising tensions. The response to the riots has been compared with the criticisms levelled at pro-Palestine demonstrations that have taken place regularly in London since October. Despite no outbreaks of violence, pro-Palestine protests have been labelled hate marches by politicians and commentators who claim that they pose a threat to the public. In contrast, some far-right commentators have even defended the current riots as the result of white Britain's frustrations with multicultural society. The judge decided to release the attacker's name in order to stop misinformation about the case from spreading. But with more unrest expected in the coming days, some are starting to question whether those who incited the violence online should be held accountable.
The violence soon spread to other areas, including central London, where hundreds of supporters clashed with authorities. In Hartlepool, more than 100 arrests were made.
Karen has texted in to say kids who've been taken to the riot by family members should be flagged up to social services. Andrew says, hello Paul, I don't think the hooligans throwing bricks and attacking mosques know the difference between far right, far left or anything else. They just enjoy an excuse to break things. It's just that they are easy targets for the divisive elements at the top of far right politics who need foot soldiers to stir it up. We need leaders who can bring us together as a country rather than divide and conquer us. Thank you, Andrew. A couple of texts here though on the flip side. Michael says, morning, if we march we are far right, if we complain we are far right. This country is changing. And an anonymous text here from someone saying, of course they care about Britain. That is why there is riots. There is riots across the country. Long may it last. We have had enough. OK, let's bring in Professor Roger Griffin now, who's been waiting patiently. Thanks so much, Professor Griffin, for hanging on for me as we as this conversation expands. You're an expert in extremism and terrorism at Oxford Brookes University. When you look at these riots, are they typical of the far-right tactics? And do you think that this is an attempt to try and stir up something deeper in Britain?
Well, I'm afraid, being an academic, I'm going to give you a complicated answer. I mean, one thing I'd like people to do is think of this as a riot and look at the way it relates to riots for various causes in the modern age. You can think of a number of causes which have exploded into violence. In France, you've got a number from farmers to people wearing yellow jackets to the riots of Algerians stuck in the outskirts of Paris in 2005. And there are race riots have besmirched the history of Germany since the unification in Eastern Germany, etc., etc. Now, there is a sort of common pattern in these riots, which is, and it picks up on some of the points that were made with your earlier speaker, and which you've had in some of your texts. I would say, in the modern age, there are various groups of people in society who do not feel, they do not recognize society as theirs, that they have various grievances. There are various people who feel that they have no place in society, or that they're being trampled down by society or exploited, or the country isn't theirs, etc. Now, that leads to a simmering sense of anger, resentment, and hatred. Then you have ideologues, either at the level of political parties or at the level of traditional politics, either far left or far right, who give concepts and ideas and an interpretation, a story, a narrative to this resentment. And that's where you get scapegoating. And you can see this writ large in the rise of the Third Reich, but also in communist rights or in the French Revolution or whatever. I mean, the people who overthrew the Bastille hadn't all read great French philosophers, but the ideas of the philosophers gave a shape to their grievances, and they saw a target in the aristocracy and the Bastille. And that's where you got this incredible violence directed against symbols of society. So what's going on at the moment is that Tommy Robinson and the ideologues of what used to be called the EDL, he also tried to set up a British equivalent of Pegida, which is an anti-Islamic movement. These are actual ideologues who think and read and have concepts, are mobilizing and channeling the sense of frustration and anger that is taking the form of, if you like, racism. If you look at, for example, the history of the National Front in the 60s and 70s, when it was being driven by mass migration as it was perceived, then if you look at the link between Enoch Powell's speech and the ideas of neo-Nazis, and then the actual violence in Notting Hill or whatever, there's this complicated relationship between people who are essentially nihilists, full of anger, who are in it for
The unrest didn't stop there. On Thursday, the situation escalated further, with a vehicle being set ablaze and riots erupting in an area with a significant Muslim population, including a mosque. The chaos was fueled by misinformation. Social media falsely claimed that the attacker responsible for killing 3 girls and injuring others at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class was a Muslim migrant.
Now, UK's mainstream media is claiming that you have, quote-unquote, fled the UK amid contempt of court proceedings. Have you, and why so, when you claim to be a patriot?
No, I haven't fled the UK. I'm on holiday with my children, a holiday that was planned. I never received any court documentation summonsing me to court. I'm not on bail to attend court. So once again, you're being lied to. There's a process that a court has to go to if they want somebody in court. That process is not to give information to far left extremist organisations who then notify me of my court date, which is exactly what happened. And am I going to go to court because a far left extremist George Soros funded organisation tells me to? No, I'm not. If I'm summoned by a court with paperwork, yes, I'll attend the court case, but I haven't been. I'm on holiday with my children. I've not run away from any court case. In fact, I look forward to these court proceedings because it's the British judiciary that's on trial, not me. Nearly 30 million people have watched my film, which they tried to ban. 30 million, okay? Only 9 million people elected the government of my country. This film is in the public's interest. I'm happy that the world has seen the truth. The media lie, they deceive, and they fool the public with their narrative. And I've gone and broke their lies and exposed them in a major way. I'm proud of my work as a journalist, and I stand for freedom of the press and freedom of the speech.
Tommy, the media says that you are lying. Is it true that Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon is your real name and that you're using the pseudonym of Tommy Robinson to hide your identity and a checkered past?
No, it's not true. My name is actually Stephen Lennon. But yes, I did use the pseudonym. Do you know why I used the pseudonym? Because if you want to speak about Islam, people want to kill you. 6 Muslims are currently in British prisons for 30 years for planning to murder me. They got caught with
this false narrative incited the mob's chants and violence. However, police later clarified that the suspect was a 17-year-old British-born man.
Create their own Shia Islamic homeland on British soil.
What I don't understand with all of this, I mean, he came to Britain and claimed asylum 20 years ago. There has to now be something that whether it's the Home Office or whoever it is, they have to look at these things and say, here is somebody who came here, wanted to be part of our society, he was given asylum, but there still has to be a longevity that anybody that now is into what he wants to do here, that should be brought into question, and he should be certainly taken in for some questioning now on this. You just can't do this.
No, absolutely. And I think Britain should take pride in its rich history of rehoming some of the world's most persecuted peoples. But that benevolence and altruism cannot be exploited by religious radicals. And the issue here is that I think that there are a significant proportion of refugees who generally want to integrate and contribute towards British life. But there are clearly some individuals who have no intention of doing that whatsoever. And I think this individual very much falls into that category. Otherwise, he wouldn't be looking to create a parallel society, in his view, an Islamic homeland on British soil, which is one of the most segregationist initiatives I've come across for some time.
You put a very good case in point as well, Dr. Rakib Ihsan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on that. Have you got anything to say about that? A little island off the north coast of Scotland, creating an Islamic homeland with Sharia law, possibly building camps and everything. Anything you want to say on that? 0344 499 1000. Give us a call tonight.
Authorities have warned of potential further violence, citing intelligence about planned protests. The Mayor of Liverpool has acknowledged the threat posed by far-right extremists and stressed the importance of combating fake news and false narratives used to incite violence.
Murder you and behead you. So yes, I did use a pseudonym for my family's protection. I don't think that's ridiculous at all.
Tommy, your critics have accused you of being Islamophobic and racist. Is that true?
Islamophobic? There's no such word. You're currently sat in India. Hindus know full well of the persecution from the hands and the hostility of Islam. You know full well of the rape jihad. I think you call it love jihad, but rape jihad. We, in this country, have been blessed with immigrants from certain demographics which have loved and embraced this country. One of those demographics is Indians, Hindus, from India, and Sikhs. So no, I have absolute love for many minority groups that come to this country, and I wish to send them a message that we will stand with you. We will unify every community against the hostility and barbarianism of Islam. I'm not racist. I despise racism. Islam is not a race. Islam is a fascist, violent ideology which masquerades as a religion. And words like Islamophobia are created by absolute cowards who are scared to have the true discussion on the problems of the core teachings of Islam and who the barbarian was who founded it. He was a rapist, he was a murderer, he pillaged, and men who wish to perfect him and believe he is the moral compass for the world will go on to pillage, rape and murder as well.
They say your movement is racist and that it is a privileged white man's racist movement.
We have huge diversity in our group, huge diversity. So our movement is full of people from every background, of every race, of every religion, okay? But we oppose Islam. Unfortunately, these are the absolute cowardly slurs that are thrown at anyone who tries to have an open, honest discussion about...
The impact on the local community has been profound. The head of the Southport Mosque expressed gratitude to the police and community members for their support.
A hate cleric with his own army raised £3 million to create Islamic homeland on a Scottish island, a story that was in the Mail this week. And the extremist is already running military-style training camps, bids to build his own school, hospital and mosque, and practice Sharia law at this remote spot. Dr. Rakib Ihsan is a social policy analyst and joins us right now. Good evening to you, Dr. Rakib. First of all, with all of this here, is how does this sit with you?
It doesn't sit very well with me, if truth be told. And evening, Mark. For me, I think that this creation of a Shia Islamic homeland in the Isle of Torsa, which is in Argyll off the west coast of Scotland, it certainly doesn't sit well with me from a national solidarity, social cohesion perspective. I think ultimately here we're seeing attempts to create a parallel society on a Scottish island, which is very much British soil, which will have its own Sharia-inspired governance, which would include its very own criminal justice system, schools, which will be run based on its interpretation of what should be the truest form of Islamic instruction. There'll be Shia seminaries. And this would also run through all of the social institutions that would be built on such an island. So ultimately here, what we're talking about is a direct challenge to national sovereignty. This is a direct challenge to that.
Well, and to the law of the land, I should think, by the time we're finished here too. I mean, the division and diversion tactics, I mean, this is nothing more basically than him declaring apartheid.
No, absolutely, and as you say, there's a direct challenge to that very concept, which is a cornerstone of our liberal democracy, which is respect for the rule of law. Because this is a direct attempt to...
Both he and the Muezzin believe that the rioters were outsiders, not locals. The mosque community has shown remarkable unity in the face of this attack.
Anjem Chowdhury has been sentenced to a minimum of 26 years. So that is 26 years and 358 days, in prison for leading a prescribed terrorist organisation.
Yes, someone known as Britain's most prolific hate preacher has been sentenced to 26 years and 358 days in prison. The judge said that the public must be aware this is not a sentence of 26 years, it is a life sentence. Those are the words of the judge describing this as a life sentence for Britain's most prolific hate preacher.
And so let's recall that Anjem Chowdhury was the leader of the prescribed group, Al-Muhajirun. He was previously in prison for inviting support for Islamic State. And once his conditions ended in 2021, he then offended again. And that is what he has been sentenced for now. So that is, as the judge says, a whole life spent in prison. So he's only, he's 57 years old now. So that would mean that by the time he would be eligible to be out of prison, he would be 83 years old.
It is quite a weighty sentence. Of course, interesting that the judge has described this as a life sentence, although we understand not a whole life order. We will be talking to our man in the court, Charlie Peters, as soon as he leaves that courtroom, to repeat in the last few minutes this sentence has been handed out to Anjem Chowdhury, the most prolific hate preacher in Britain, the self-described Islamist who has been found guilty of leading a terror organisation. 26 years and 358 days in prison.
And so significant because al-Muhajirun, the group that he notoriously led, has been connected to so many terrorists, Islamist terrorists, people who have gone to join Islamic State. And also Anjem Choudhury, of course, known for being there on the conversion of Michael Adebolajo, who killed the soldier Lee Rigby, and also reportedly present at his marriage. So Anjem Choudhury is connected to a number of notorious Islamists, and his organisation, as I say, connected to so many terrorists throughout the years. In his previous sentence, he only served, I think, around 2 years of that before being let out.
Locals have described the scenes as shocking, with displays of hatred, racist slogans and projectiles being thrown. The community's resilience and solidarity highlight the strength in unity against hate and violence.
We all know they get persecuted, they get raped, they get butchered, they get murdered, and they're driven from their own lands. So all the Islamic nations that once were Christian, once were Hindu, that have been absolutely obliterated with no human rights, no support, and no protection for minority rights. That's the reality when Islam becomes dominant. I want to do everything I can in my power, as humanly possible, to stop the Islamic takeover of my nation. And being a coward and being afraid of silly little words like racist or Islamophobic is not going to stop us.
By that logic, that makes you a minority in your own country. But having said that, you lost the libel case brought by Jamal Hijazi, a Syrian schoolboy. The judge said that you made Hijazi out to be a violent aggressor in the playground incident when he was in fact the victim, and that you made false claims. But you've maintained that law has been manipulated. Why so?
Well, if you watch the documentary, you'll see that 7 teachers and 5 pupils support me in those allegations. You'll see that the school records say that Hijazi got caught with a knife and screwdriver in school. You'll see that the school records state that he stabbed someone. The entire country was deceived with this lie. I broke that lie with my documentary. The judge, a corrupt judge, gave me an injunction preventing the public from seeing the truth. Right now, the public have watched the truth, nearly 30 million of them. So in the court of public opinion, I've already won. If the judiciary wish to send me to jail, which I believe they do, they want to lock me up. Once again, more people will watch the documentary, more people watch the film. I will be remembered as the journalist who absolutely destroyed the credibility of the British judiciary.
So, Tommy, are you saying that is the reason why your documentary Silenced has been banned? Why did you screen the documentary against the High Court orders at the Trafalgar Square on 27th July when it was banned?
I'm a journalist. I believe in freedom of the press.
It underscores the dangerous role misinformation plays in fueling violence and emphasises the need for truth and solidarity in challenging times. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and for more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.